the idea was to see if you could marry someone who was Jewish. Was that a big deal?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you didn't think of anything else. I had nobody, I never dated anybody who wasn't Jewish, but then we were very fortunate because we had all these Jewish frats and we had the community center and it seemed that there was always something doing for the young Jewish people here in town.
It was a great place to grow up, was it not?
Well, if you were Jewish, and it was. But we were, I don't know how to say that. Our family was not ghettoized. When I grew up, we lived on Cumberland Avenue. We were the only Jewish family for blocks and blocks and blocks. And my mother's house was the hub of the whole neighborhood. If there was a funeral, everybody came in there and they donated, you know, for the flowers. If there was a wedding, if there was anything.
Even if it wasn't Jewish?
It wasn't Jewish because we were the only Jewish people around. And every night she would have the neighbors in. I was a chubby little kid because every night we would have tea and crackers and cheese and jam. Very precocious too because they were all adults. But she was the hub of the neighborhood, my little mother. I grew up in a very Jewish background because we were very poor. And we lived with my grandmother and grandfather on Charlton Avenue, where that Olympia Towers is now, you know, the apartment building. The only thing that's left in that neighborhood is that park where I used to play. There's a playground, and I used to play there when I was little. But my grandmother and grandfather were very observant Jews. My grandmother did not make a big deal out of it, but she was Jewish, and when she went to synagogue, she went to Hess Street. And so we went to Hess Street, and all the women, of course, sat up above, and the men sat down below. And my little grandmother would sit in her little pew beside the window, and she would be pages ahead of the rabbi. She would just sit there the whole day and just go on and on and on and on. And
what was her name?
Bella Sachs. Bella Sachs. And she was an amazing little woman. I remember her getting up at, when I was very young, at some woman's group. It must have been the Pioneers, the Women's Pioneers group in town. And in Jewish, giving an impassioned speech about, I don't know what it was at the time, but this little bit of a person. I always wanted to be as tall as she was so I could reach in the kitchen where they had the string hanging down from the lamp and be able to turn the lamp on. And she was just tiny, and she just ran that whole house like.
Was she really fluent in English?
It's funny, the men in our family, my father was born in Lithuania, but he came over younger. He never had an accent. My mother never lost her accent. Mm-hmm. My grandmother never lost her accent. My grandfather spoke beautiful English.
Your parents spoke Yiddish to one another? Or
yeah.
English? Yiddish?
Yiddish, yeah.
I see.
So I'm very fluent at understanding it. I speak a real gehackte Yiddish.
I see.
If you know what that means.
No.
Like chopped herring,
oh.
I speak chopped Jewish.
I see, I see. And who was connected to the Farband? Or
my father.
Your father?
My father. My father died when he was 51. So he was, I think, 46 or 47 in this picture. And it's like old Hamilton. This is the Hamilton group of the Arbiter Verband. And I know that it's around somewhere because I took it for Edie Roken because all the names are written in Jewish and I can't read it. And she couldn't read very much either.
That's an important photograph to try to find, and I'll tell you why, because if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be the 100th anniversary of the Verband
Really?
in Canada, and a friend of mine is organizing a conference, I think sometime in the fall. And if there is this photograph.
Oh, there is, it's here.
There is, right?
Oh, it's around here, yeah. I know.
Yeah, that would really, I mean,
I
he
will-
would be most appreciative.
We wouldn't have taken it back outside. It's going to kill me now. I won't sleep.
Just keep talking.
So were there other, I mean, there's the Verband, and your father is obviously active in Verband. Are there other Jewish organizations that you...
Well, my mother used to be a ticket seller supreme. She would go out for the Pioneer Women. This is when they went door to door, and nobody refused her. She would make more money for the Pioneer. Wendy's going like
But what
this.
was
It's my
her-
group. It's my group.
what's
Is
her-
it? Is there?
Na'amat. It's called Na'amat.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Well, my mother was, you should have had her. She really, nobody ever refused her. They
And
were
her name was
Bessie Sachs.
Bessie Sachs.
Yeah.
We have about 3 tapes of her 100th birthday.
3 videotapes.
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. She was 103 when she died.
Wow.
She finally decided that was long enough.
And
But
was it? Oh, look at this.
well,
I don't mean it. What
is that the one?
Just kidding.
Is that the one?
Oh, wow. This is
You're on
quite...
tape, Jerry, you're gonna miss it.
There's.
That's all right.
Where's my father? Oh, there he is. You look like Charlie Chaplin. Oops.
Yes, this must be written in Yiddish.
Yeah, it's all written in
I
Yiddish.
see.
He is
Yes.
fluent Yiddish.
I see.
Fluent.
He reads it
It's
too?
hard
Yeah.
to believe. It's hard to
He
believe at
reads
some
it,
point that
yeah.
I am Jewish, isn't it? But we'll come back to
You know, your cousin, twice removed, Debbie
Debbie who?
Mose, Debbie Goldblatt,
Yeah.
like she and I were friends,
Yes.
and she really used to blow me away because she could read and write Jewish. That was because of the grandfather, because,
Sure.
I mean, like she would go in, it was like the mafia. She would practically kiss his ring when we went in to see him.
So did you also go to some Jewish
Well,
afternoon school, or was there anything?
oh no.
You did not?
No, I didn't do
Okay.
that, and I didn't go afterwards. In fact, I went, Rabbi Fackenheim was the rabbi at the time, and I took lessons for a bat mitzvah, but I never was bat mitzvahed.
No one was bat mitzvah.
Well, confirmed.
Ah, that's
Confirmed,
right, that's
yeah.
right.
I never was confirmed.
Right.
And I finally taught Sunday school
Where?
at Anshe Sholem.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, like the old one, the one on Houston Street. I taught Liz Tick, and I taught the Bloom kids, and I taught Martin Yaffe, who was my favorite. He was always the hero he was the king in the Purim play. And I love Liz Tick to this day. She's never changed. And I also was a camp counselor at Kadima.
At Kadima?
Yeah.
Was this in the 70s?
This was, oh no. Oh, he is such a nice boy.
We were married 20 years by then.
Can you talk about Camp Kadima in those days?
Well, it was run, actually, I was with the junior group, and they were the 3 and 4 years old, and it was in the John Street Community Center, and it was such a hot summer. And what they would do, there was a mother and a daughter, and I think the daughter was a school teacher, and they would come and they would live in this barracks community down east somewhere, and they would come and they ran the junior group, and I was sort of their CIT, junior counselor, whatever, and they would give me the little roustabouts to take upstairs after lunch, the ones that wouldn't settle down, And we would go up to this hot little room, and we would swelter up there until it was time to come down and go to the beach. And I remember going to the beach, Station 26.
Why don't you talk, what is the Station 26?
Well, you know, Frank and
Dolly.
No. Ruby and Levy.
And Bella.
And Belle, okay. They had a cottage. They had a very fancy cottage down there.
Where is this Station 26?
The old Burlington Beach Strip.
They're named after where the buses stopped, I think.
And it was where the buses stopped. And we had, my poor mother, we had a cottage on Garfield Avenue, which was farther down, but everybody would come to Station 26. You would go over the railway tracks and through this little area between houses. I feel sorry for the people who were living in the houses, and there was Station 26, and everybody was there.
Wait, everybody mean
That's where the Jewish community
So
herded.
can you describe the beach? Like, was it really?
It was fishy. It was fishy. You would walk into your ankles and you would freeze because the water was so cold. You would eat down there.
What was this? The beach, was it sand?
Oh, it was sand. It was definitely sand, but to get to the water, you had to go through dead fish. And then across the road was this amusement park. I mean, we had a lot of things going in Hamilton. And people would go, it was simpler. You'd go to the amusement park, you could get ice cream, you could play on the teeter-totters. There was a pavilion there where the older people could go dancing.
So people actually had cottages on the
Oh, yeah,
They
yeah.
lived in for the summer?
For the
Even
summer.
though they lived in Hamilton?
That's right, that's right.
And they lived like a half an hour drive away? Or
Yeah, but you know, we didn't have a car. So my aunt and uncle would rent the cottage. My aunt and uncle had no children, and he did very well. He had the Victoria Cap Company. And they would rent the cottage, and my mother would stay down there. And I remember taking the bus into town with her once. I mean, it wasn't that easy. It was like going from here to Barrie now, if you lived in Hamilton.
And did they have where would you do your grocery shopping? Did they have little stores?
I was too young to worry about grocery. I think my aunt and uncle probably brought it out at night when they came.
They probably had little grocery.
Yeah.
The whole Diney's Hotel was there.
I mean, I don't remember. I mean, that's like.
And then the kids would just hang out there all summer long?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know, in Toronto, the Jewish community lived in the Spadina area, Bathurst, Spadina for the most part, but they would, you know, in the early 30s, take a Queen Street streetcar and go all the way out to the beaches.
Yeah.
You see?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in Toronto, the residents who lived in that area were none too happy that Jews came in for the summer, and I was just wondering whether anything like that was the case in Hamilton. Do you remember?
I don't remember. In fact, I remember very little anti-Semitism growing up. I really was not aware of it. It wasn't until I got into high school and I thought I was very friendly with the Catholic girl in high school. And we were walking along the street someday. I didn't look very Jewish to begin with. I was always blonde, and I really did not have Semitic features, and I didn't look at, and Sachs is not really a very Jewish name, and we didn't go into things like that. And I remember she made some horrible slur about the Jews, and I thought she was my friend. And to this day, it sort of cuts me to the quick. And then another friend of ours, as we were married and we were quite good friends, they weren't Jewish. And I remember she said something to me about Jewing them down, and I just gritted my teeth, you know, that this would come out.
Sure.
But other than that, I don't really remember anything
Did you know that up until the mid-40s or thereabouts, Jews couldn't own any property in West?
Oh, that's true. That's true. It had to be under my brother's name. When we moved to Westdale, we were moving up, and we moved to Bond Street. It had to be, you had to be born in Canada. They didn't say you couldn't.
British Empire,
Or in the, yeah. And my mother and father were both born in Palush in Lithuania, and so they couldn't own the property. It was under my brother's name. Are you sort of honing in on anti-Semitism, or is this just?
No.
That's his thing.
No,
is that your thing?
No. I mean, it was not unique to Hamilton. I mean,
No,
you know,
no.
from Montreal.
Oh, I remember. Where was it up north? Dogs and Jews are not allowed.
I remember.
And that man from London finally got that.
Well, the wolf, you know, he made a big issue, you know, in outside of London there, you know.
Well, you had those signs outside of Toronto.
Yeah.
And numbers of people remember these signs, you know. So I'm not saying that it was unique to Hamilton. I mean, different people encountered it in different ways. I mean, in the 1930s, in the early 1930s in Hamilton, I wasn't living here at the time, you must understand. But if there were any department stores, whether it was Eaton's, Robinson's, or whatever, Jews did not work in those department stores as clerks. The banks didn't hire Jews. It's just the way it was.
My aunt.
Gerri has a good exception to this.
I have an exception. My aunt, when she was 18, went to Robinson's, and I mean, she would be 108 today. So, you know, this is quite a while ago. But she went to Robinson's and they hired her. She also did not look very Semitic. But I remember Mr. Smith, who owned Robinson's, she was only about 16 or 17 there, told her to put her hair up if she was going to work there. She wound up being the buyer for the cosmetic department, the jewelry department, the neckwear department, and the leather. And as you walked in, she was the first person that you saw in Robinson. She was a dynamic little woman. Everybody knew her. She had the Elizabeth Arden concession completely signed up in Hamilton.
Her married name, Miss Sachs.
It was always Miss Sachs. And I remember going in there one day when I was a kid, and Sori and Riva were just that much older than I was, and they were so glamorous, these 17-year-old teenagers, and the two of them were leaning over the counter, mesmerized by something my aunt was saying. That picture is here. You know, it'll be there till I drop.
So she was a personality, because one of the things we are asking people to talk about are personalities within the Jewish community.
Oh, my mother was a personality.
So okay, go ahead.
My grandmother was a personality. Got watered down. My little grandmother was really a personality. I mean, when her house, it was one of those terrace houses on Charlton Avenue. The Wisemans lived there, you know, Dr. Yaffe. His wife grew up there. The Obermans, Lil Cohn, did you know her? Okay, well, they grew up there. Bill Cohn, who owned a delicatessen, his parents were there. My grandmother and grandfather. And you know Charlie Dubin, who was the Chief Justice
Of Ontario.
of Ontario. He grew up right beside my grandmother. And if you want a little anecdote, I've got one about Charles Dubin, who became such a great man. He would come into my grandmother's house because my grandmother always had food galore, you know, and his mother was very sweet, but they weren't quite as balabutish as my grandmother. And he would eat and eat and eat and eat. And my grandmother fed him, and then she said, would you like something to drink? Would you like some water? And he says, water I can get at home.
That's good.
She, you know, my grandmother really, because I lived with them, I think I really got an understanding of them, and they were really wonderful people, and they were really with the Jewish community. And my mother and father, when we moved to Cumberland, my mother was always with, as a matter of fact, her best friend was Norman Levitt's mother. There was a whole group of them. They were the Saturday nighters, and they would go to every different house. If I'm talking too much, you can stop me.
Here, the Saturday nighters. You're the first person to have mentioned that, and I know there's still a group called the Saturday Nighters.
Well, this was just a group of friends. There were Victor Rosenberg and Eva Rosenberg, and my mother and father, and the Levitts, and the Garshowitzes, Ruth, and he had a little store on John Street, a little cigar store. And
Barney Hirschman?
No, that was Garshowitz. And let me see, Laser Levine and Frida Levine.
So what was this group, the Saturday Night?
They were just a group of friends who met every single, and the Pacons, Shruel and Fanny Pacon. I mean, that was a tragedy. She had that horrible disease, that Huntington's chorea. And let me see who else there was. Anyhow, in the summertime, we would all go on picnics. The mothers and fathers and this whole group, and we would go to Dundurn Park, we would go to LaSalle Park, we would go everywhere. Every weekend there would be a picnic in the summer. Every Saturday night there was a party in somebody's house. And my mother would work a whole week to make enough food for an army for this party. I mean, she would be chopping herring and chopping liver and doing this and doing that. It would be the whole week because she was having this group, and they would try to outdo each other.
So it would alternate at different people's houses?
Yes, and what would happen is there were no babysitters. So the kids all went, and we would be up till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and you know, in a bedroom, and we would be falling asleep or, I don't know, doing something.